and that is with Susie Kellett. Susie Kellett is the director of the Illinois Film Office. And I first met Susie, in fact, we were talking about this yesterday, I believe it was around 1981. We both worked on the film Pennies from Heaven with Steve Martin and Bernadette Peters. And I remember it was Murray Schwartz that introduced us, and we were in Galena, Illinois. It was a very rainy day. I think Susie was sitting on the ground waiting for the rain to stop. And never did I realize about 13, 14 years later that Susie would be heading up the Illinois Film Office. Susie, welcome to You and Your Business.
Good morning.
How are you this morning?
Hi, it's nice to talk to you again, actually, Marty.
It is. Well, I kind of got snowbound last week with the weather. I was going to plan on doing this interview in your office live from Chicago, and I would love to see you, but neither one of our cars started that morning. It was a bad day, wasn't it, Susie?
Bad day.
Tell me, before we get into your business side, Susie, my listeners and I would like to get to know you a little bit personally, and I know a little bit about you, and let's share your personal life a little bit with Detroit. Susie, where are you from originally?
I'm from Illinois. I'm from a suburb about 25 miles north of Chicago. Grew up there. Went to school out west.
What suburb was that?
Northfield, near Winnetka, Evanston, Wilmette, for any of your listeners that know the area.
Yes. David Wallace Johnson here is shaking his head. Yes, he knows right where that's at. And so you went to school at high school?
Richard High School.
Oh, that's a very famous high school.
And then headed to Colorado, where I tried very hard to never let my education interfere with my skiing, and that's about what happened. And lived out west for a long time in Idaho, actually, and then came back here.
Yes, and listeners, before I met you know who I started to say Lucy Salinger here.
My predecessor.
And Lucy Salinger was actually the head of the Illinois Film Office when you first started, I believe. Was that 1981?
Right, she hired me.
Yes, and so we met there in Galena, Illinois. And but a few years before that, I believe about 4 years before I met you, I had seen a photo in a story about you in People magazine, Susie. And you had, why don't you share our listeners what happened there?
Well, I have quadruplets. I have 18-year-old quadruplets, 2 boys and 2 girls that are freshmen in college right now. And I did a story for People magazine on another set of quadruplets and their mother. And actually what had happened is the editor had said, why don't you just spend a weekend with this other mother and you guys can talk about your raising your 8 kids. And it was terrific. It was wonderful. I went to Connecticut, and it was like a 48-hour therapy session with somebody who would understand exactly what it's like to raise multiple births. And that's what you saw was the result of that weekend and that story.
That was quite a story, because speaking for myself and all the other mothers out there who just have had one child, I raised 2, but my 2 were a year and a half apart, so I had 2 in diapers at the same time and 2 in bottles, but they didn't go through all these things at the same time, and I just can't comprehend, Susie, how you've done it all, because I know that your children were about 4 years old when we met.
Yeah, I think they were just about 4.
And now they're all in college.
Oh, they're all in college, and the house is very, very quiet.
Oh, well, now you can devote more time to your civic interests, which I know you have many. I know that you were one of the founding members, of Women in Film in Chicago.
Right.
And do you want to share with our listeners some of your other interests that you have?
I'm on a board, Learn for the Creative Arts, which provides free legal service to people in the arts. I'm on an advisory board for independent filmmakers. I've been on the United Way board in the town that I live in, and I'm just now taking a look now that I have a lot of time since the kids are off as to what it is that I'd really like to do. I'm going to be coaching for the Special Olympics beginning actually this month. And I think there are other things out there, and I'd like to find out what they are and get involved in them.
Oh, that's wonderful. Very, very good interests there that really help people, Susie. Susie, let's get into your business side now. First of all, I'd like to know, what makes Chicago such a popular place to film?
Well, it's a number of things. We built this feature film and television business off the commercial business. Chicago had always been a very popular place to make commercials. It had a very strong post-production section in it. And so when features and television started to leave California and go out in the world for in search of realism, Chicago had a lot of the ingredients that would make it successful. And when you're working on any project, it has to work creatively for the script, the location has to be right, and it has to work financially for the budget. So the less you have to bring with you in the way of equipment or personnel, the more appealing a place can be. And Illinois, from the beginning, it had the infrastructure of equipment suppliers, a crew base. The theater in Chicago is famous, so they could pull actors from that community. The labor unions have been very accommodating and really sort of gone with the ebb and flow of this industry as it changes rapidly. And also, Chicago can be Chicago, or Chicago can be very anonymous. If your listeners saw The Color of Money, Chicago ended up being 4 or 5 different cities, and no one ever left here. It's just a matter of where you shoot it so that you don't put identifying buildings or structures or the L in the viewfinder of the camera. So Chicago is very appealing, and it's been very successful.
It really is. You know, I first saw Chicago on film when I saw the Blues Brothers, and that was the year I started my business, and I thought that was one of the best movies that really depicted Chicago. It's such a beautiful city, you know, to be photographed. Do you agree with that?
What the Blues Brothers did was that when Mayor Daley was here, he was not wild about filming, and I think he would have been if he was alive today. I mean, he was a man who saw Chicago like a father sees his child, and he wasn't very fond of anything that disrupted it. And this movie business was a fairly new thing, and it is a lot of trucks, a lot of people, a lot of confusion. But so Hollywood had this sense that it was difficult to film here, and suddenly the Blues Brothers came out, where you were dropping cars from helicopters, you were smashing up police cars, you were running through malls, and I don't think there are dollars that could be assigned to the marketing value, and it really made the motion picture industry sit up and say, boy, you know, look what you can do in Chicago now.
Yes.
And from then on, it just started to grow.
Yes, very true. In fact, the most recent film that I saw that was filmed in Chicago was Two Fathers, starring Robert Conrad and George Hamilton. And I noticed that Bobby Hudisek, who we both worked with for many years, was the director of photography. And when you see Bobby, I want you to tell him that Marty said hello. Tell him I miss Chicago. But tell him, most importantly, that he did a beautiful job at Chicago. It really looked beautiful on film.
It did, and Robert Conrad's from here. And it's always nice when you have a director, for instance, with The Fugitive and Andy Davis. You know, but Robert Conrad and Andy Davis are born and bred Chicagoans, and they come in here and use the city in a way that that filmmakers who aren't from here aren't able to do. I mean, they know it intimately. They know how they want it to be. They love it, and you can feel it almost conveyed that way. I mean, I thought The Fugitive for me, even though the huge bus train wreck was in North Carolina, the rest of it was done here, but there were very, very high aerials that were shot, much higher than you ordinarily see, and it really made the city look spectacular. And Andy, this is his fourth or fifth picture, and I think he's going to continue to come back here and make them, because he just loves working here, and he has a marvelous eye for how to bring a story alive using what we have.
Yes. Well, you know, I don't know if you realize this, but I worked with Robert Conrad when I cast Will, and that was the life story of G. Gordon Liddy. In fact, I talked to G. Gordon Liddy about a week ago, and we're trying to work out where we can broadcast each other's shows simultaneously. And I'd also like to talk Liddy into doing a feature film, and maybe we could do all that in Chicago, Susie.
Awesome. We'll help you do it.
Yes. Meanwhile, we have just a few, maybe 5 more minutes here, but I want to cover as much as we can here before we report the current jobs that are available in Detroit. You and I worked together in the early 80s, and I want to know, are things kind of different today in 1994 than they were in the early 80s?
Well, I mean, we've now put more than 500 motion picture and television productions on the streets here, and the movie business isn't stationary. It doesn't stay in one place like an auto assembly plant. It moves. It's kind of like a little streetwalker. Mm-hmm. And you can't put this volume of people and equipment in an urban center and not have a little bit of the glory come off. And I mean, now what happens when we approach locations, a lot of the times they'll say, Susie, I know the economic development story, I know the jobs and the dollars, but how is this really going to make, how are you going to help not make this a hassle for me? So where we used to market very, very heavily to LA recognizes us, and because of the repeat business, loves to make movies here. really, the Chicago Film Office and I spend a great deal of time working with villages, business, communities, railroads, museums, trying to work out their problems, trying to help them work with the film companies so that we don't have doors shut on us. The volume is great now. We did $115 million worth of business. We do about 28 projects a year. It's wonderful to see these projects on film, but I want us to be able to continue to do that, and now it's taking a lot of education, information, sort of smoothing ruffled feathers and just staying on top of everything that's happening out there, because the public demands more and more in special effects, in pyrotechnics. I mean, if you look at these movies that are being made, if you look at Star Wars and then you take a look at things like Backdraft, I mean, these are huge pictures to make, and, you know, we have to make sure everything is safe and the experience is good for everybody that's involved. But Illinois continues to be a wonderful place to make movies. And
it really does. You've really explained it. What you've all done there is it's been a tremendous amount of teamwork between the cities, the Illinois State Film Office, and the John? I'm sorry, the man who had it's Charlie Jacors, who heads the city office.
Right.
So you've all worked very closely together to take care of things like permits and you know, it's just the teamwork that's made it you know, real successful for filming. I know that you've had your most successful year last year. You did $115 million
Right.
business. And how do you feel about that, and how did it happen?
Well, I think, it's wonderful. And some of the movies like Rudy, The Fugitive, My Life, which is out now, With Honors, which will be coming out, Blue Chips, which will be coming out. Really what happened is that we had 2 television series shooting simultaneously, which is long-term and puts a lot of people to work. And then John Hughes, who makes, you know, The Home Alone, Dennis the Menace, Breakfast Club, 16 Candles, he probably will do 2 or 3 pictures a year. And Oprah, who lives here and has set up a production company called Harpo, Oprah spelled backwards, has got an arrangement with ABC. So she has done a couple movies in a week. I think we'll be hearing more from her. And it's wonderful having those kinds of people living here and making a commitment to work here. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I'm a great skeptic. I'm never sure that any year is going to be as big as any other year, because if they start doing pictures about Vietnam, I don't think we're going to put a picture. But for last year it was wonderful, and we're going to give it our best shot this year, and we have some things in the pipeline that I'd really love to have come here, and we'll just have to see. We're just working away at them.
Oh, I'm sure you are, Susie. And, you know, for people that are in the Detroit area or Windsor, Ontario, Canada, producers that are looking to scout locations, do you charge for